There is a quiet exhaustion many people carry, the kind that doesn't show on the surface. It lives in the body, in the nervous system, in the silent questions we ask ourselves when no one is listening. Am I safe? Am I seen? Am I protected? We search for strength in a world that often overwhelms us, and in that search we sometimes forget that our deepest need is not control but connection. Psalm 121 speaks to something ancient within us, the longing to feel held, watched over, and not alone in our vulnerability. When we talk about God's holy fire, we are not speaking of destruction, but of a presence that burns away fear, illusion, and the weight we were never meant to carry. This fire is not outside of us, it is something we learn to trust. Something that reminds us that even in our most fragile state, we are not abandoned. There is a deeply rooted belief many people carry, often without realizing it, that they must hold everything together on their own. It begins early in life, sometimes as a quiet adaptation to environments where support felt inconsistent, unavailable, or unsafe. A child learns, not through words but through experience, that relying on others may lead to disappointment, so the nervous system adjusts. It tightens. It becomes alert. It starts to equate control with safety. Over time, this adaptation becomes identity. I have to be strong. I can't depend on anyone. If I don't do it, no one will. What once served as protection slowly becomes a burden. Self-reliance in its healthy form is not the problem. The issue arises when it becomes absolute, when it leaves no room for vulnerability, no space for receiving, no openness to something greater than oneself. In that state, the body remains in a constant low-grade stress response. The mind keeps scanning for threats. Even in moments of rest, there is a subtle tension, as if something might fall apart at any second. This is not strength, it is survival mode disguised as independence. 121 introduces a different perspective, one that challenges this illusion at its core. It does not dismiss human effort, but it gently redirects the source of ultimate support. I lift up my eyes to the hills, where does my help come from? This is not just a poetic line, it is an invitation to shift awareness. It asks a question many people avoid. What if you are not meant to carry everything alone? What if the constant striving, the tight grip on control, is not the solution but part of the struggle itself? The illusion of self-reliance often disconnects people from their own deeper needs. When someone believes they must always be the strong one, they suppress the natural human longing for reassurance, for protection, for something steady beyond their own fluctuating capacity. This suppression doesn't disappear, it settles into the body. It may show up as fatigue, anxiety, or a sense of emptiness that no achievement seems to fill. The more one tries to prove strength, the more distant they may feel from genuine peace. Divine support, as reflected in Psalm 121, is not about passivity or abandoning responsibility. It is about recognizing that there is a presence that does not fluctuate with human limitations. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. There is something profoundly regulating about this idea. The nervous system, which has been conditioned to remain alert, begins to soften when it senses consistent watchfulness. Not surveillance, but care. Not judgment, but protection. When a person begins to internalize this even slightly, the grip of self-reliance loosens. They may start to notice that they don't have to anticipate every outcome, control every detail, or carry every emotional weight. There is space to breathe. There is room to acknowledge uncertainty without immediately reacting to it. This is not weakness, it is a recalibration of where safety comes from. The illusion tells you that if you stop holding everything together, everything will fall apart. But often what actually begins to fall away is the tension, the hypervigilance, the exhausting need to be in control. In its place, there can be a growing trust, not blind, not forced, but dite emerging from experience, that support exists beyond your own effort. That you are not abandoned to manage life entirely on your own. That there is a steadiness available, even when circumstances feel unstable, and in that shift, something subtle but powerful begins to change within the body and mind. As the need to constantly prove strength gives way to the possibility of being held, there is a quiet, often unspoken need within every human being, the need to feel safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally and internally secure. It is the kind of safety that allows the body to soften, the breath to deepen, and the mind to rest without constantly scanning for what might go wrong. For many people, this sense of safety has been inconsistent or fragile, shaped by experiences where protection felt uncertain or where vulnerability was met with unpredictability. Over time, the nervous system adapts by becoming alert, guarded, always prepared. It learns to rely on anticipation rather than trust. This is where the idea of a higher protector becomes deeply significant. Not as a distant concept, but as something that speaks directly to this unmet need for safety. Psalm 121 does not present protection as something occasional or conditional. It speaks of a presence that is constant, watchful, and unwavering. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. There is something profoundly regulating in this image. A protector who does not grow tired, who does not withdraw, who does not become distracted. For a nervous system that has learned to expect inconsistency, this introduces a completely different possibility. Emotional safety is not created through force or control. It emerges when the body begins to sense that. It does not have to remain in a constant state of defense. When there is an internalized feeling that something steady is present, the need to brace against life begins to ease. This is not about denying reality or pretending that challenges do not exist. It is about shifting the internal experience of those challenges from facing them alone to facing them with a sense of support that does not waver. The presence of a higher protector, as described in Psalm 121, offers a form of containment. It suggests that there is something holding the larger picture, even when individual moments feel uncertain or overwhelming. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The imagery of shade is not accidental. It implies relief, covering, and protection from what might otherwise feel too intense. Just as shade shields from the harshness of the sun, this presence offers a buffer against the emotional intensity that can overwhelm the human system. For someone who has spent much of their life in a state of hypervigilance, this idea may not be immediately easy to trust. The body does not shift simply because of a concept. It shifts through repeated experiences of safety, even if those experiences begin as small moments. A pause where the breath softens. A moment where the mind does not immediately jump to worst-case scenarios. A subtle recognition that not everything needs to be controlled in order to be okay. These are the beginnings of emotional safety being restored. The higher protector is not meant to replace human relationships or invalidate the importance of connection with others. Rather, it complements and deepens that sense of connection by providing a foundation that does not depend on changing circumstances. People may come and go, situations may shift, but this presence remains described as constant. The Lord will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. This continuity speaks to a form of security that is not tied to external stability but exists even within change. As this idea becomes more than just words, something within the individual begins to reorganize. The body, which has been conditioned to stay alert, may begin to experiment with letting go of some of that tension. The mind, which has been trained to anticipate danger, may begin to allow moments of stillness. Emotional safety, in this sense, is not something imposed from the outside, but something that emerges as the internal system begins to trust that it is not alone, not unprotected, and not left to navigate every uncertainty without support. There is a common association many people have with the idea of fire, something dangerous, consuming, something that destroys. It evokes images of loss, punishment, or something out of control. And when this imagery is connected to the divine, it can deepen a sense of fear rather than bring comfort. People may internalize the belief that God's power exists primarily to judge, to burn away what is wrong in a way that feels harsh or unforgiving. This perception can create distance, not connection. It can make the idea of divine presence feel threatening rather than supportive. But when we look more closely at the deeper meaning behind God's holy fire, especially through the lens of Psalm 121, a very different understanding begins to emerge. This is not a fire that exists to harm, it is a fire that exists to heal. It is not fueled by anger, but by a kind of clarity that illuminates what has been hidden, what has been carried for too long, what no longer serves life. Healing in its truest form is not always gentle in sensation, but it is always oriented toward restoration, not destruction. In the human experience, pain that remains unprocessed does not disappear. It becomes stored within the body and mind. It shapes reactions, perceptions, and emotional patterns. People may carry fear, shame, grief, or anger for years without fully understanding how deeply these experiences have embedded themselves. Over time, these internal burdens can begin to feel like part of one's identity. This is just who I am. But often it is not who they are, it is what they have had to hold. God's holy fire, when understood as healing, represents a process of transformation. It is the gradual releasing of what has been held too tightly. It is the gentle but persistent exposure of wounds that have been covered over, not to shame the individual, but to allow those wounds to finally be seen and tended to. In this sense, the fire does not destroy the person, it clears what obscures their true self. It burns away illusion, not essence. There is a discomfort that can come with this kind of healing. Letting go of long-held patterns, even painful ones, can feel unfamiliar. The body may resist, not because the change is harmful, but because it is new. Familiar suffering can feel safer than unfamiliar peace. This is where the compassionate nature of this fire becomes important. It does not force change in a way that overwhelms the system. It works in a way that aligns with the individual's capacity to process, to integrate, to gradually move toward wholeness. Psalm 121 speaks of a God who watches, who protects, who does not sleep. This watchfulness is not passive, implies an active presence that is attentive to the needs of the individual. When this presence is understood as a healing force, it changes the relationship one has with it. Instead of fearing exposure, there can be a sense of trust that what is brought into the light is not there to condemn, but to be transformed. Healing fire also brings clarity. It illuminates patterns that may have gone unnoticed, ways of thinking, reacting, or relating that are rooted in past experiences rather than present reality. This clarity is not meant to overwhelm, but to create awareness. And awareness is the first step toward change. Without it, patterns continue unconsciously. With it, there is a choice. Deepens. The idea of divine fire shifts from something to be avoided to something that can be approached with openness. Not because it is always comfortable, but because it is aligned with healing rather than harm. It becomes a presence that supports growth, that allows what is heavy to be released, and that creates space for something lighter, more grounded, more connected to emerge within the individual. There is a state many people live in without fully recognizing it, a constant readiness. A subtle but persistent scanning of the environment for what might go wrong. It is not always dramatic or visible. It can look like overthinking, like difficulty relaxing, like the inability to fully be present even in calm moments. This state is often referred to as hypervigilance. It develops as a response to uncertainty, to environments where safety felt unpredictable, where the mind and body learned that staying alert was necessary for protection. Over time, this vigilance becomes automatic. No longer feels like a response, it feels like reality itself. Hypervigilance is not a flaw. It is an intelligent adaptation. The nervous system does not create it randomly, it develops because at some point it was useful. It helped anticipate danger, avoid harm, maintain some sense of control in situations that felt overwhelming. But what begins as protection can become limitation. When the system remains in this heightened state for too long, it begins to take a toll. The body holds tension. The mind rarely rests. Even in safe environments, there is a lingering sense that something could shift at any moment. This is where the invitation to trust divine watchfulness becomes significant. Psalm 121 introduces an image that stands in direct contrast to hypervigilance, a presence that watches continuously, without fatigue, without inconsistency. He who watches over you will not slumber. This is not just a comforting phrase, it challenges the deeply ingrained belief that one must always be the one watching, always be the one anticipating, always be the one preventing things from falling apart. Letting go of hypervigilance does not mean becoming careless or unaware. It does not mean ignoring reality or abandoning responsibility. It means releasing the excessive, exhausting need to monitor everything beyond one's control. It is a shift from constant alertness to grounded awareness. The difference is subtle but profound. Grounded awareness allows for presence without tension. It allows the body to remain engaged with the moment without bracing against it. For someone whose system has been conditioned toward vigilance, this shift is not immediate. The body does not simply relax because the mind understands a concept. Trust, especially in something unseen, develops gradually. It begins with small moments, pauses where one notices that nothing is immediately wrong, that the anticipated threat is not present, that the body can afford to soften even briefly. These moments, may feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable. The absence of tension can feel strange to a system that has learned to associate tension with safety. Divine watchfulness, as described in Psalm 121, offers a different kind of security, one that does not depend on personal effort alone. The Lord is your keeper, the Lord is your shade at your right hand. There is a sense of being accompanied, of not being solely responsible for maintaining safety at every moment. This does not remove challenges from life, but it changes the internal experience of those challenges. Instead of facing them from a place of constant defense, there is the possibility of facing them from a place of support. As this idea begins to settle, even slightly, the grip of hypervigilance can begin to loosen. The body may start to release some of the tension it has been holding. The breath may deepen without effort. The mind may begin to experience moments of stillness that were previously rare or inaccessible. These shifts are not dramatic, but they are meaningful. They indicate that the system is beginning to trust that it does not have to remain on guard at all times. This process is not about forcing relaxation or denying the reality of past experiences. It is about creating new internal experiences that gradually reshape the nervous system's expectations. When the system begins to sense that there is a consistent presence that does not fail, that does not sleep, that does not withdraw, it can begin to experiment with letting go of the constant need to watch. And in that space, something begins to change, not through effort, but through the gradual realization that safety does not have to be maintained entirely through tension, that watchfulness does not have to be carried alone, and that there is a different way of being present in the world, one that is not driven by fear but supported by trust. There is a kind of weight that does not come from the outside world but from within, a weight the body carries quietly, often without words. It is not always linked to a single event or a clear memory. Sometimes it is the accumulation of many small moments. Stress that was never released, emotions that were never expressed, responsibilities that were taken on too early or held for too long. Over time, this weight settles into the body. It shows up as tightness in the chest, heaviness in the shoulders, fatigue that sleep does not fully restore, or a constant sense of pressure that is difficult to explain. The body does not separate itself from experience. It holds what the mind cannot process fully. When something feels overwhelming, the nervous system adapts by containing it, storing it in a way that allows the person to keep functioning. This is not a failure, it is a form of protection. But what is stored does not disappear. It remains, influencing how a person feels, reacts, and moves through the world. The longer it stays unaddressed, the more it can begin to feel like a permanent state rather than something that can shift. Psalm 121 introduces a different possibility, not just protection from external harm, but relief from the internal burden that has been carried in silence. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. This kind of watchfulness suggests more than observation. It suggests a steady presence that holds what the individual has been trying to hold alone. When everything feels like it depends on one's own capacity, the body remains tense, as if it cannot afford to let go. But when there is a sense, however small, that something else is sharing that weight, the system begins to respond. Spiritual release is not about denying the reality of what has been carried. It is not about pretending that the weight does not exist or forcing oneself into a state of calm. It is about allowing the possibility that the burden does not have to be held in the same way anymore. This shift begins subtly. It may start with awareness, recognizing where tension lives in the body, noticing patterns of holding that have become automatic. Awareness itself does not remove the burden, but it creates space around it. It brings what was unconscious into consciousness. As this awareness deepens, there can be moments where the body begins to let go, even slightly. A breath that moves more freely, a shoulder that drops without effort, a moment where the mind is not gripping tightly to every thought. These moments may seem small, but they are significant. They indicate that the system is beginning to trust that it can release, even if only for a short time. Release is not a single event, it is a process that unfolds gradually, often in layers. The idea of divine support plays an important role in this process. When the body believes it must carry everything alone, it resists letting go because letting go feels unsafe. But when there is a growing sense that there is a presence capable of holding what feels too heavy, the need to grip so tightly begins to soften. This is not something that happens through force or willpower. It happens through repeated experiences of feeling supported, even in subtle ways. Spiritual release also involves letting go of the narratives attached to the burden, the beliefs that have formed around it. Thoughts like I have to stay strong all the time, or if I stop holding this together, everything will fall apart. These beliefs often operate beneath awareness, shaping behavior without being questioned. As they begin to surface, there is an opportunity to see them for what they are: adaptations, not absolute truths. The body, when given the right conditions, naturally moves toward balance. It does not need to be forced into relaxation, it needs to feel safe enough to allow it. As the sense of support deepens, the internal environment begins to change. The weight may not disappear all at once, but it becomes more fluid, less fixed, less overwhelming. There is more space within the body, more capacity to experience without becoming consumed by what is being experienced. And within that space, the possibility of living without carrying everything alone begins to take shape. As the burden that once felt permanent starts to loosen its hold and the body slowly remembers what it feels like to be supported rather than strained, there is a subtle but powerful force that shapes how many people move through life, and that force is fear. Not always in its obvious form, but in the quiet decisions, the constant calculations, the need to anticipate outcomes before they happen. Fear-based living does not always feel like fear, it can feel like responsibility, like caution, like being prepared. But underneath it, there is often a deeper belief. That safety depends entirely on one's ability to predict, control, and prevent what might go wrong. This way of living creates a particular relationship with the future. The mind stays oriented toward what could happen often, imagining worst-case scenarios as a way to feel prepared. The body follows this pattern, maintaining a level of tension that matches the perceived uncertainty. Even in moments where nothing is immediately wrong, there is a sense of waiting, as if something could shift at any time. This is not a conscious choice, it is a learned way of being, shaped by experiences where unpredictability felt unsafe. Psalm 121 offers a different orientation, one that shifts attention away from constant anticipation and toward a steady awareness of support. The Lord will keep you from all harm, He will watch over your life. This does not promise a life without challenges, but it introduces a different foundation for meeting those challenges. Instead of relying solely on personal vigilance, it points to a presence that remains consistent regardless of circumstances. Moving from fear-based living to faith-based awareness is not about denying fear or forcing oneself to feel something different. Fear does not disappear simply because it is unwelcome. It has a purpose, it signals perceived threat. It mobilizes the body, it prepares for action. The shift lies not in eliminating fear, but in changing the relationship to it. Instead of allowing fear to dictate every decision, there is the possibility of acknowledging it without being controlled by it. Faith-based awareness is often misunderstood as blind belief or passive acceptance. In reality, it is a grounded sense of trust that develops over time. It does not ignore reality, it engages with it from a different internal state. Where fear tightens and narrows perception, faith allows for openness. Where fear pushes for immediate control, faith creates space for response rather than reaction. It is not about certainty, it is about stability within uncertainty. This shift begins in small, often unnoticed ways. It may appear as a moment where the mind does not immediately jump to the worst conclusion. A situation that would have previously triggered anxiety may feel slightly more manageable. The body may remain a bit more relaxed in the face of uncertainty. These are not dramatic transformations, but they are meaningful. They indicate that the internal system is beginning to operate from a different baseline. The presence described in Psalm 121 plays a central role in this process. The Lord will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. This continuity offers a form of reassurance that is not dependent on specific outcomes. It suggests that support is not something that appears only when things go well, but something that remains even when circumstances are challenging. This consistency allows the nervous system to gradually shift its expectations. As faith-based awareness deepens, the need to constantly manage the future begins to ease. This does not mean becoming passive or disengaged. Actions are still taken, decisions are still made, but they come from a different place. Instead of being driven by urgency and fear, they emerge from a sense of grounded presence. There is more clarity, more space to think, more capacity to respond rather than react. The body reflects this shift as well. The chronic tension that often accompanies fear-based living may begin to soften. The breath becomes less restricted. The sense of being constantly on edge starts to diminish, even if only in moments at first. Over time, these moments can expand, creating a new pattern within the system. This movement is not linear. There may be times when fear resurfaces strongly, when old patterns reappear. This does not mean failure, it reflects the depth of conditioning that has been in place. What changes is the awareness of these patterns and the ability to return again and again to a sense of trust that does not depend on everything being under control, and within that returning, a different way of living begins to take root. One where the future is no longer something to be constantly feared, but something that can be approached with a steadiness grounded not in certainty, but in the quiet, growing awareness that one is supported through whatever unfolds.